as it relates to the consultant firm that was hired to be involved in the process of selecting the master developer, the qualifications, making sure that we got the best qualified master developer, what will their role be now that a letter of award has been offered?
This is where they begin to really earn their money, because they will be sort of in the middle of representing the city in terms of negotiating this letter of intent, in terms of making sure that all the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed, and that it also passes the reality check. That's most critical with both of these. They've got to pass a reality check, which gets back to Mr. Jewell's question. And we'll be relying upon Starbucks to make certain that that is the case on our behalf.
So the contract that we currently have with Starbucks, is that will that be an ongoing contract throughout this process, or does that terminate at some point, or are they continue to serve as a project manager for us for the whole development, even with the master developer, once we get past the letter of intent?
Right. The contract with Starbucks basically entails the Boulevard project, 6th Street Marketplace, and the public safety building. So it's, when we did the contract, we were anticipating future activity. So it's those three potential projects. With respect to this, what we're presenting today, their requirements with respect to this part, or the boulevard, would conclude at the time that we've got a definitized, executable agreement with Highwoods. Hopefully that makes sense.
Okay, then I'm sure I'll get some backup on that from my colleagues. But let me get to the recommended development as it relates to the retail, the office space, what have you. I'm a little interested in knowing how, from the procedure process, one of the things that I'm very interested in, and I want to really understand the procedure process, the RFP process, the hiring of Starbucks to actually find a qualified developer, and then this awarding based on that qualification and the process that we're going through. One of the things that I'm particularly interested in as it relates to economic development in the city of Richmond is that we establish a policy for economic development so that we all understand what that process is and everyone feels that that is a workable process for us. And this is a first major test process that I think we should perhaps use this as a beginning of a perhaps model of a policy process that we want to put in place. In saying that, the input as it relates to the conceptual use is suggested in this presentation today as to what is the best use or potential best use for this site as it relates to the mixture of uses. Was there any information used from any master planning or studies that we've done previously that has indications to suggest that these are the uses that the city feels that fits into our vision, or is this recommendation of the mixed use primarily coming from the developers that responded to the proposal?
We did not try to dictate to the developers who we issued the RFP to in terms of locking them into a particular vision. We wanted them to sort of let us know what they thought would be the highest and best use for the location, and that's what we received.
Okay. And I would be very interested in understanding and getting a better appreciation for why the Shockoe Bottom happens to be the best location for the ballpark, and whether or not there were other locations within the city that was considered, and what made this one more feasible or the best location to make a recommendation for it to be. We've had a lot of discussion about Shockoe Bottom. As a matter of fact, at the beginning of this administration, I think we started off with this. The first year I was elected to serve on city council, one of the questions that we had to answer is whether or not I would support baseball park in Shockoe Bottom, and it seems like we're back at the same spot. So do you have any information as to reason why something that we pretty much had decided wasn't going to work 4 years ago seems to be the magic spot now?
Yeah. Although I wasn't here myself at that point, but as I've studied the situation, that group, I believe it was Global, was that group, and there's a major fundamental difference between that business entity and Highwoods. What happened was then, from what I've been able to ascertain, is that the group just really didn't have any financing. They had no money. They had a lot of talk, but no money. Based on what we have received from Highwoods and what we have seen, they are very well capitalized at this point, even in a down market. In terms of Shockoe Bottom as a site, as I said, when we received the 6 responses to the RFQ, just about each one of the developer teams gravitated to downtown, to that location, which we didn't necessarily expect to happen, but when it did occur, we said, let's go out and do some more analysis to figure this out, the viability of the potential of baseball in that location. And that's when we commissioned ERA to do a study. And as a part of the ongoing dialogue and discussions, I think what we can do, Ms. Robertson, is perhaps give you an overview of the overall findings from that analysis, that study, which would probably answer your question a lot better than I can do right now today.
Okay, well, thank you. And I'm
just
sorry,
one
Ms.
follow-up
Robertson.
question. That's it. It's prime for the preliminary funding. I'm sure as a part of this process and doing the qualification for the master developer, there have been some indications of some preliminary funding that would be necessary to make some of this happen. Any information that you can provide to help me appreciate that would be helpful as well. Thank you.
Not a problem.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr.
As a matter of
President.
fact, I'm sure that all members of council will want to see the full ERA analysis, and that'll help. Is there a further question? Mr. Hilbert.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, Mr. Black.
Good afternoon.
This seems to be a complete rejection of an amateur athletic facility along Boulevard. And to me, that did hold a lot of promise for economic development, and I'll tell you why. Because unlike baseball, which only lasts 3 months out of the year, there were comparable facilities or facilities that would complement this so that we could have people visiting the city almost 12 months of the year in order to compete in these amateur athletics. I dare say that the marathon and the 10K, to which the sports backers are a part, has a much more significant economic impact than the Braves had on an annual basis as far as overnight stays and so forth in local hotel rooms. Given that we do have a track record on that, did any of the proposals address that as what was envisioned before did have, in my opinion, some economic merit that on a year-round basis, whereas I'm not seeing that with this proposal.
I'm not quite clear on what you're...
Well, if we were talking about economic development, and I know economic development just isn't about tourism, but it would seem to me that a baseball field as part of an overall complex, which is what was originally envisioned here as I understood it, this seems to be a complete rejection of that, and what I'm asking is, did anyone look at that as a concept of continuing and modifying the stadium to fit within that context?